All right. So energy is added continuously. God is continuously adding energy from his 심정, in the love, and always in love. The output is greater than the input. And so in Father's teaching, that is why the universe will continue to expand forever, because it comes from God. And in that sense, God is continuing to create. And I'm very, inspired that the universe is the homeland of humanity. Even Reverend Yu would say that physical human beings will never occupy the entire universe. I beg to disagree. I think 1,000,000 years from now, we'll see human beings all over the universe. But we got to resolve this situation of sin first. All right, we don't want to be, having mutinies on the Starship Enterprise or something like that, right? But we can go to, where no man has gone before and stuff like that. That's all well and good, but let's resolve this question of sin before we start expanding into the universe. And I don't know if we're going to create colonies on Mars and so forth, or if we're going to have spaceships that have, that sort of replicate the environment of the Earth, and then use the planets as sources of raw material. That's also possible. Father talked about there being clumps of diamonds out there, right? Yeah. Let's go. First things first. Let's get all the people on the earth. Let's get them all cleaned up first. Okay. Let's create this 심정 culture on the earth first before we get excited and start blasting off into the universe. And if the billionaires want to do that, spend 5 or 10 minutes in space and come back, all right. Well, I'm sure that creates jobs. That's better than keeping it in the mattress. Anyway, let's continue. But I think in the future, 1,000,000 years from now, it will be all over the universe, and it'll all be under the Chonrikuk Constitution as well, as Chonrikuk will exist wherever human beings exist. So then, let's go here to 3. The original substance of the principle has the relational nature of subject and object. There's always this in relationship. And so God, in traditional Christianity, is sort of an isolated being out there by himself and just sort of enjoying himself. But in Father's teaching, God is a relational object, a relational being. And because he's relational, he's also vulnerable. Right? If you are trying to create an object partner of love, then if that object partner chooses not to love you, then you're in trouble. So he's also, although he is omniscient and omnipotent, but he is also a vulnerable God. And that's why he has this situation right now. But it's a process that we're going through. And we're almost at the end of that process now, where we're actually going to start having human beings on earth that are free from that original sin and still going through the other sin, sure, still resolving the other sin, still taking that muddy water and keep pouring in the clear water of God's word, and so as to get rid of all the mud. That takes time, but we're getting there. We're going in that direction at least. And the world is going crazy with Marxism and critical race theory and gender ideology and all that kind of stuff. But we are in the world, but not of the world. So we always need to draw a line between ourselves and that kind of nonsense. But we're getting there. We're getting there, and a new heaven and a new earth will appear on this earth before long. God is the harmonious unified body of original Songsang, original Hyongsang, and is the harmonized unique being of oneness. And so original Hyongsang and Songsang have a relationship of subject and object. And original Yang nature and original Yin nature, which are attributes of original Songsang, original Hyongsang, also have a relationship of subject and object. So everything is in relation. The difference between subject and object is a difference of positional role and a difference of locational position. And the expression of kyogui, or positional role, here the translation is positional role. Another translation might be status. Status expresses that man is the masculine subject partner, while woman is the feminine object partner. From a locational position point of view, man has the subject role and woman the object role. The subject has the right side and the object has the left side. In this case, the subject partner cannot be the object partner and the object partner cannot be the subject partner. This is the same as how a man cannot become a woman. Did you hear that? Thank you for that. Man cannot become a woman, and a woman cannot become a man. Here, principle and law and order apply without exception. There was a story a couple of days ago about how in California prisons, birthing people, do you get it? Birthing people are going to be allowed to keep their babies when they have their babies in prison. And, you know, and that's all well and good, but just the expression birthing people, right? Because, you know, men can have babies. Yeah, men can have babies. Not all men have penises. Some have vaginas, you see. Yeah. Yeah. This is the world that we live in. So that's why, as I said just a moment ago, you know, this crazy world is literally falling apart, but God's world of goodness is expanding right now. So we just be in that world, but not of that world, please, and take all that stuff with a grain of salt and with a few laugh. That's why I laugh so much during the King's Report. Because it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Birthing people, I guess. I've never had a baby. I'm a non-birthing person, yes. Birthing people, yes. So we've established that man cannot become a woman and a woman cannot become a man. Here, principle and law and order apply without exception. In other words, an individual has certain moral standards and norms that must be kept. And the family also has certain moral standards and norms must be adhered to. The universe has a principled order. All these are examples of the Chondo, or heavenly way, which prescribes how individuals, families, and the universe itself must exist, move, and act. During our study of the family pledge, I talked about the word tori, 가정의 tori. In English, this is been in the official English version of the pledge. This is translated as the way of the family. But in the family, we have relationships, and in those relationships, there are certain things that are expected of us. There are certain things that we are expected to do. If you're a son or a daughter in a relationship with your parents, there are certain things. Also, a parent, certain things that you're expected to do in relationship to your son or daughter. Siblings, the same way. So in any kind of relationship like that, there is a tori, and within the family there is the 가정의 tori, officially the way of the family. But way is kind of it's a literal translation, but it doesn't really convey the full meaning. But I think you understand that even also in the West. But think of the pre-industrial family especially. I think, and this was one reason that a long time ago there was the television series, the Waltons, right? And they lived under one roof in a big house, right? And I think, the Industrial Revolution really destroyed it's called the extended family, and when I was blessed with my wife, I became a member of an extended family in Korea, in a small village in Korea. And it was quite an experience. Yeah. Unfortunately, that extended family, well, it still exists in some ways, but not as much as it used to. Or people would gather at the parents' home for the holidays and so forth. And I was the number 2 son-in-law. My father-in-law would call me number 2 for short sometimes. He was a great man. Yes, he was a very, very nice and very kind man, very gentle. But unfortunately, both. Well, I say unfortunately, but he and my mother-in-law were both blessed before going to spirit world. So perhaps I hope that they are working out very well there. So if men and women leave their correct positions and do not live in a principled manner, as beings within their correct positional roles, they become unable to complete the purpose for which God created them. And in that extended family, we were all, as I said, I was, my name was not Tim or Tim Elder. My name was number 2 son-in-law, or number 2 for short. And everyone was referred to by their positions. So like uncle or aunt or whatever, so in that sort of Korean tradition, you are referred to by your position within the family. So a woman is referred to as so and so's mother, for example, not by her name, but so and so's mother, usually by a very small child, very small child or something like that, a mother of. And Western feminists would go berserk over this. How can you deny a woman's identity by not referring to her by name? But actually, people would take great offense if they were referred to by name. I made that mistake. I referred to my brother-in-law one time by name, and he didn't mind it too much. But his wife became very angry. You see, because by not referring to his position, I was basically excluding her from the whole family, right? Because her position in the family could only exist as long as he had a position. And since I referred to him by name, it was a big to-do. She forgave me. Okay, Carrie.
Tim, could you make a comment regarding the fact that Father talked a lot about how in love that there can be some kind of switching of positions, like if the little grandson gets on the knee of his grandfather and starts playing with his beard and, kind of dominates, crawls all over his grandfather, that he kind of, in one sense, takes a temporary subject position, because I think this has been misunderstood by some people,
right,
as thinking that their positions are interchangeable. They are not. But Father talked about that. Could you just make a comment about that?
And that, I think we'll be getting into the 3 object purposes later on, and that's in relation to that, where in a 4-position foundation, each of those positions can be in a subject position, and so the grandchild grandchild on the knee of the grandfather can, will pull the beard of the grandfather. I think it was father's expression, and the grandfather will be fine with that, and things like that. But that's different. And we'll see how that's different, I think, when we get to that part of chapter 1. We're still in chapter 1, yeah. And we'll get to the 3 object purposes eventually. Yes, Scott?
Well, this is just a small testimonial along the lines of how you can do things wrong, Korea versus America. In Belvedere, I overheard Hyojin in one time, somebody referred to him as Hyojin Hyung. So me being the little way I am, I approached him that way. I said, Hyojin Hyung, and he nailed me. For whatever reason, I don't know, but it was wrong. That's all I got.
Okay. I don't think I want to speak to that, but okay, yeah. Okay. All right, okay. So let's move on, yeah. But this idea of the extended family and the universal family of heaven and earth that the pledge refers to, where we are not just the extended family on earth, but also the ancestors in a spirit world as well as being part of a big family that is continuing through the ages, is something that Father emphasizes. Okay? And so, yes. So the difference between the subject-object in the non-changeable, unchangeable subject-object role here and in the three object purposes, we'll get into that later on. If a being leaves its correct position, the reciprocal partner being has no choice but to wait until the wayward partner returns to its correct position. It must persuade that partner being to return. And there are many people who are going through this kind of situation right now, where one person may be in Father's authority and the other is not, and so they are waiting. And that is an option that they have. You know, if one spouse leaves the faith, then the remaining spouse has the option to wait like this, or to go through a process of divorce. But when you think of what divorce does to God's ideal of creation, I hope that we can make those situations rare. And it's difficult, And in some cases, there's simply no other option, I know. Yeah. Completion is not something that can be achieved alone, but only through one's partner. Now, one person who has taught divine principle a lot told me that he understood that in the original ideal, men and women reach completion alone and then come together as husband and wife. And then it's only in the restoration that you are blessed at the top of the growth stage and then reach completion together. But in the OSDP and in the Poncheron, I think the teaching is that you are, even in the ideal, blessed at the top of the growth stage and then reach completion together. That's what this says right here, right? Completion is not something that can be achieved alone, but only through one's partner. Okay? Accordingly, all beings exist in a relational way and exist for the sake of their partner. Because, think about it, 4 realms of Shimjong, right? You only reach completion when you have completed the 4 realms of Shimjong, but the latter 2, husband, wife, and parent, you can't do it alone. Carrie.
So let me see if I can understand this. The traditional, 3 blessings in the ideal sense that Adam and Eve were to have individually come to a sense of completion as on an individual level. So can we say that I can understand that you do not become complete as a person until you have a spouse and experience that realm of heart and have children experience that realm of heart. But is there not a sense of completion that you can use in terms of the first blessing, in terms of your individual relationship with God, the unity of your mind and body centered on God's love and truth?
I think it's important to realize that the 3 blessings do not occur consecutively, but there is overlap. I will not say simultaneously, because obviously 1- and 2-year-olds are not going to be blessed. But there is a overlap, so that even with the dominion over the universe, all right, we don't wait until we have established a family centered on God and perfected the family, perfected the second blessing before we start doing the third blessing,
right,
dominion over the universe. Even a child is starting in a primitive way to have a dominion over creation. But yes, and I do believe that Father taught that Adam and Eve fell 16, but also just before he planned to give them the blessing,
Right.
a blessing in marriage.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I guess that just we believe that Jesus Christ was the example of a perfected human being, a completed human being, but on the individual level.
Yes.
So I just
But
I think it's a both and, honestly, in what maybe
right. But
saying.
Jesus wanted to be married a long time before he reached 30 years of age.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So when you think about husband, wife, 심정, how can you complete that 심정 unless you have a husband or a wife or parent? Accordingly, all beings exist in a relational way and exist for the sake of the partner. Thus, each must live for the sake of the other in order to achieve completion. Existing for the sake of each other means to both exist for the sake of one's partner's perfection or completion and to exist for the sake of the completion of God's purpose of creation. So as a husband, I'm trying, it's my job to help my wife reach completion, and as a wife, it's her job to help me reach completion. So we are both existing, living for the sake of the other. So you're not perfect when you first get married. Yeah. It's probably an important point to realize that your husband is not perfect. Your wife is not perfect. She's not a completed individual. But it's your job to help him reach that point, and her job to help the husband, or each other anyway. Each other's job to help each other reach that completion and to realize God's purpose of creation. Some people are looking bewildered here. Is that okay? Yeah, but it's obvious, right? I mean, it's obvious, right? Husband and wife, 심정, parent 심정, how can you do that alone? It's impossible. Only in relationship can you do that. If you live for your partner, you will help your partner complete themselves, him, herself, or herself. And by completing your partner, you will, in essence, complete yourself. A subject partner and object partner must love and live for the sake of God vertically and for each other horizontally. As it says in the scripture, high places shall be made low and low places shall be raised. The thought expressed in the Korean saying, 경청애인, that's to respect heaven and love human beings, is imbued in the same meaning. And the universe is vast and unlimited. How big is a galaxy from the point of view of solar systems? Cosmological scientists estimate that our galaxy has some 100 billion stars. If you count to 100 billion at a rate of 1 count per second, it would take you 3,200 years. Scientists also say that the distance between the stars in our galaxy is tens and hundreds of thousands of light years. In addition, they estimate that there are 200 billion galaxies in our universe. And it's continuing to expand. Yeah. Can't wait to get out there. Can't wait to get out there. But first things first. Fundamental principle behind motion in the universe. The state and motion of the universe were always thought to be both highly complex and hard to understand. Thanks to today's dazzling scientific advances, we have come to understand that countless physiochemical and astronomical laws control the natural world. Nonetheless, as far as the state of motion of the universe is concerned, there are still many unknown areas. Regardless of how many minute, complex, and subtle phenomena the motion and state of the universe gives rise to, the basic principle of the state and motion of the principle of give and receive action, that is the principle of the four-position foundation. Only in the fallen world and in the world of sin, that is to say, only in fallen human society are these fundamental principles not functioning, giving rise to a multitude of complex problems. Accordingly, fundamental solutions to today's individual, family, and global problems can only be established when these fundamental principles are applied correctly to a human society. So the rest of creation, doesn't have a problem with this, but it's just human society because we have sin. And so some people will say, especially elite, will say, the world would be fine, would be much better off if human beings didn't exist. But that's because they say that because they don't know God's purpose of creation. And it may be true that if you were to wipe out all humanity, the world would be better than it is now, but you're losing the opportunity to become something that is far, far greater than what it would be if there were no human beings. If there were no human beings, then God would have no way to be in his creation. There would be no one to exercise dominion over the world with God's Shimjong. And so eventually the world would then fall apart, basically. It would just become a wild forest that's not attended to, for example, and then eventually all the trees would die. It would collapse in on itself. So human beings are necessary in the long run, and but it has to be not just the kind of human beings that we have today, but human beings that do not have sin, and do not have original sin or others, and maintain absolute sex and keep the order of the universe going. Yeah. And in the future, too, there will always be the possibility of evil. God created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right, before the fall. So the concept of evil already existed before the fall, but that was because God gave and needed to give human beings a choice to love him or to not love him. Because without that choice, love would not have any meaning. The choice to love does not have meaning unless there is also the choice not to love. In the future, some foolish people may make that choice not to love, but they are not Adam and Eve, and so entire humanity will not go into sin as a result of their foolish choice. The problem with Adam and Eve is that they were the first ones, and so all, as the Bible says, in one man all sinned. So in one man, all will be saved, it says in the New Testament. Adam and Eve sinned, and as a result, all of humanity fell into sin. In the future, if someone makes that foolish choice, then their descendants will be affected, or if they have descendants, and also they can be brought back very quickly. It will not take such a long, long, long time as we have now. Okay. All right, we're at the end of a big section. Is there any question before we go into the next section, before we start talking about the relationship between God and humanity? Okay, Carrie?
If Adam and Eve had not fallen, then there would be no Satan. However, it still would be possible in the future that descendants here and there would decide not to obey the commandment and choose to fornicate before being blessed by their parents in marriage. If that was the case, would you say that evil still had the potential to exist, or would you use another word for it? Is evil always connected with there being a Satan?
So Lucifer would have been the servant of Adam and Eve, and would have been serving at least most of humanity. So I don't know if there's no real. If for example, Lucifer, or let's say some other angel, is tempting somebody, who's not Adam and Eve, but somewhere down the line. I don't know. That's a hypothetical situation. It's a bit difficult to answer, but always there is the choice not to love. But would it be a fornication between the angel and the human being? I don't know. That doesn't seem right. It might be very difficult for that to happen because Adam and Eve basically have good control over the angelic world, and Lucifer and Michael and Gabriel, the three archangels, have pretty good control over their forces. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that would really happen. But someone might choose to fornicate, but that would be their own decision and their own choice and their own foolishness, and that could be brought back fairly quickly within that generation.
Actually, I wasn't thinking so much about angelic influence, but just human beings choosing to.
Yeah.
And but yeah, in thinking about that, it would seem, that's why the role of Adam and Eve and the central lineage being so important. That Adam,
Right.
I think, is perhaps more Christ-like than I first realized in his
Right.
original incarnation. Because if people drift away, it's possible.
Yes.
But then they come back to the God's lineage.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But would you use the word, maybe it's a moot.
So if that happened, put them through the holy wine ceremony and the 40-day separation and 3-day 3-day ceremony again, to get them blessed. Yes. So today there is that wonderful pathway where people who were born with God's lineage, but for some reason or another gave it up, can come back to that lineage, but as first generation. And I guess that would be the case in the future as well for people who make this foolish decision. As time goes on, it will be more and more obvious that this is foolish. And right now, mom and dad are the only ones who believe in this stuff, and nobody else believes it. Like when I was a child, I thought that my mother and father were the only people in the world who spoke English. I mean, why go to the trouble of learning this language, which obviously only 2 people in the world even speak? That's what I thought, right? Later on, turns out there are a lot of more people who speak it. I didn't know that. I really know. There was a time when I would refuse to speak English. My parents would talk to me in English. I'd reply in Japanese. Obviously, Japanese is the language of the entire known world. That was my known world. When I was 6 or 7 years old. But that was foolish. Yes, and the foolishness became obvious later on. So now, it looks like only a small group of people believe in all this nonsense and things like that. But as the truth becomes more and more accepted, then the foolishness of going against this truth will become also much more obvious. Yeah. All right. Relationship between God and humankind. The mind-body relationship, human beings are the second God. Meaning, not don't take that literally, okay? We're talking figuratively here, because we reflect God. And so, let me get my pointer out here. So God is comparable to the mind, and human beings are comparable to the body. So the relationship between God and human beings is comparable to the relationship between mind and body. And so we should see beings as if they are God. Now, when we are relating to someone, we should relate to them as if they were God. So someone who is of a different race or ethnicity or maybe economic standing, maybe a homeless person, something like that. You look down on someone, but you have to realize that we should be relating to that person as if they were God. Hey, maybe an angel. You never know. That's probably, if you're going to meet an angel, probably that's where you'll meet him. Listen to human beings as if they are speaking God's words, and uphold the sacredness, value, dignity, or dignity of human beings. But, sometimes when you're listening to people, it's pretty clear they're not speaking God's words. Yeah. So then you can deal with that situation as you best can. Yeah. And father-son relationship, all beings must have parents in order to exist. Parents must have children in order to be parents. And the greatest hope of human beings is to become a true parent, not a false parent. Yeah. So then the relationship between the father and son, and the son, then the father is then raising the son for what? To become a groom. And we'll see later on that, you know, this is the most important point in educating our children. Not to make them, you know, of course you want them to be doctors and lawyers and president of the United States and all that's very good, but more fundamentally, we need to raise our sons to become good grooms and fathers, good husbands and fathers, and our daughters to be good brides, wives, and mothers. That's the most fundamental thing that parents must do with in educating their children. So then, when the children are in that relationship, when they gain qualification as children, then the parents also gain qualification as parents, and then that is the parents' Sabbath, Father expressed. With the knowledge, loyalty, filial piety, and attendance, and the Shimjong love and character flowing from the parents to the children, and loyalty and filial piety and fidelity from the children to the parents. And so, in a similar way, then, God wanted to form that relationship with human beings. When human beings became complete, then that would make God God, and He would have His Sabbath. But Satan destroyed that relationship, and so the fallen human beings are the object of God's sorrow. Yeah. And many, you know, among us who are parents know about that, right? About God's sorrow and the sorrow of parents whose children are not united with them, centering on the principle. But hey, God's been patient for all this time, and I know that those children will also return to their parents as time goes on. Adam and Eve are children of God. True love moves through the shortest, most direct line, and that is the. Father talked about, you know, the speed of sound, speed of light, but actually even faster than that is the speed of thought and the speed of love. Adam is God's son, and at the same time God's body, because God takes on Adam's body in exercising dominion over his physical creation. And God's daughter, Eve is God's daughter, and at the same time Adam's wife. And the marriage of Adam and Eve is God's marriage, manifestation of the substantial God. The first love of Adam and Eve is the first love of God. Up until the present, God has not been able to use a body in order to experience substantial love. Well, up until the present, now I think that's changing. You know, with the blessings that are happening now, especially those within the true family. God's substantial love experience is only realized and firmly established after the appearance of the true parents. All beings are born from the parents' lineage. Offspring are the total substantiation of their parents. So the four key principles of coming into being: the children come from the love of their parents. Children come into being belonging to their parents. Hey, you know, not to the teachers, not to the state, not to the teachers. As I think I mentioned before, the teachers consider the children to belong to the state, and they are agents of the state, and they expect the parents to be the agents of the teachers. Just make sure they do their homework. That's all we want for you to do. That's all. Don't interfere in what I'm trying to teach them. But actually, teachers are the agents of the parents because the children belong to the parents. And you know, there are, of course, situations where children are abused, and that's where this whole idea of child protective services comes into being. But when the state claims ownership of the children, that is a huge problem. And if the parents are somehow incapable of taking care of the children, then probably the task should go to another member of that extended family, grandparents or aunts or uncles or something like that, but certainly not the state. Is the state going to provide parents shimjong? No, not at all. Are the children going to express the children's shimjong towards the state? Well, actually, some do. But that's not going to work. And children come into being for the sake of their partner, for their future partner, if they are not yet blessed. Somewhere out there, he's there or she's there, somewhere out there. Children come into being for the sake of eternal life, yes, for eternal life. God creates us all as eternal beings. And so we go through these three stages in our mother's womb, in the physical world, and then in the eternal spirit world. We are born into these three worlds. But we need, in each of those first two, we are preparing ourselves for the final third spirit world, where we will live eternally with God. But only if we are fully prepared here to, in other words, to complete that those four 심정, that irrepressible impulse to give love or invest love in an object partner so as to experience love and joy from the position of a child, from the position of a sibling, from the position of a parent, or I'm sorry, a husband or wife, and then position of a parent. So how do we become God's true sons and daughters? We must resemble God. No, did I fiddle with my cable here? It's all okay, right? Okay, we must resemble God. Children must resemble their parents in their internal character and their external form in the lineage. So not just in their external form, but also in their internal character as well. And a true human being is a human who resembles God. We're talking about the ideal now here. We don't want a child of a thief to resemble, the father who's a thief. Hopefully they'll become somebody better than that. Hananim, this God, has dual characteristics, a unified body of these two sets of dual characteristics, but also human beings, mind and body, husband and wife, unified body, there also resembles God in that way. And for God, his essential attribute is 심정, that irrepressible love. So also in human beings, that 심정 should be the essential attribute. True life, true love, true life, true lineage, and absolute sex. So maintaining purity before marriage and fidelity in marriage is necessary for that. God's motivation for creation is 심정, that irrepressible love. So also for human beings, the motivation for living should be that irrepressible love. You have to be alive in order to continually give love into your object partners, not just your wife, but also to your friends and your siblings and your cousins and all the people in your workplace, the people in church. It just always, your motivation for living is 심정, the irrepressible love. If people live that way, I don't think they would ever commit suicide. So God, creation, investing oneself and developing of self, and also human beings, we are creating our own character. We are participating in our creation, investing ourselves in the development of self, living for others, sacrifice and service. God is absolute, unique, eternal and unchanging and eternal, and also human beings absolute, unique, unchanging and eternal, as an individual, as a couple, and as a family. The true love, true life, and true lineage, absolute sex, that's within God, and also we resemble that ourselves. And absolute faith, absolute love, absolute obedience. God has absolute obedience toward his principle of creation. And after Adam and Eve fell, he didn't say, oh, well, I'll just, toss that away and try again. No, we're going to make this work. He had absolute obedience toward his principle of creation, knowing that his principle of creation was perfect, and so therefore, because it's perfect, it can deal with any situation that comes up. So the fall of Adam and Eve, it derailed God's purpose of creation, but only temporarily. I know, temporary, hundreds of thousands of years temporary, but anyway, temporary. It was not permanent. And God maintained his obedience toward his own creation principle. Didn't just say, okay, I'm going to go off on Mars and see if I can create another intelligent life and see if that'll work. No, that's not what he did. He continued to work with what he had created here on earth. Okay? So also the same here. Absolute faith, absolute love, absolute obedience here. God's responsibility, create human beings who resemble his own nature. Human responsibility is to resemble God, and in Shimjung and true love and character principle, in order, law, and in absolute sex. So absolute sex is absolute divinity and absolute character, and the completion of God's portion of responsibility for God, and also absolute sex for human beings, absolute character. We then, within ourselves, we are able to receive God's divinity within ourselves, and completion of ideal oneness of God and humankind in love. So here, conclusion is that God is my parent, and I am God's child. A true human being is a human being of absolute sex, Shimjung, and true love resembling God, where Shimjung is that irrepressible love. So we get into the whole then concept of education. Well, what is important in education? In human education, Shimjung and norms, knowledge education, skills, and knowledge. Yeah. We also need skills. We need doctors, we need lawyers, but that's not the most fundamental thing. Because the most important thing in education is to raise a child to fulfill the three great blessings of God that God gave in Genesis 1:28. Be fruitful, multiply, have dominion over the earth. This is what God gave to Adam and Eve, and also later on, he gives it to Abraham and to other. He's repeated a number of times in the Old Testament. That represents God's ideal of creation right there in that one verse of Genesis 1:28. So that's God's purpose of his purpose of creation is his will. Right? So the completion of the individual and the wholeness, the whole individual, and both mind and body, and multiplication, completion of the family, and governance, or completion of dominion over all creation. Those are the concepts that we need to have in education, and education methods. For the fulfillment of the first blessing, the education of Shimjung. A child needs to, as the king has talked about having one-on-one time, right? One-on-one education, one-on-one training, he calls it, which you could also call it one-on-one education, where you have individual relationships with each child. Take the child out, mother and father take the child out for a meal or something like that, and then sit down and talk about what you are each grateful for. What the child is grateful for the father and for the mother, and then the parents also list the three things that they are grateful for in the child. So to spend time with each child. I did this very, very limited way, but even in the very, very limited way that I did it, I can see now that it did have an effect. One day when my daughter was, how old was she? She was 5 years old. She was very upset because she had been, raised in Japan until then, and then we yanked her out of her environment there and took her to a country where she could not understand a word, in Korea, in other words. So we went out, and for a whole day, I took her to a little theme park. Not really a theme park. Don't think of Disneyland. This is a very primitive theme park. But for a 5-year-old, it was heaven. And just for a whole day, she could do anything she wanted. Any kind of little game machine. I kept putting in the 101 coins, and she kept playing them. And I kept feeding the machine there, and we came to a little, that's a whack-a-mole game, right? You know what whack-a-mole game is, right? We came to one of those, and she could barely reach the back row. In fact, she couldn't reach the back row of the moles, when they came up. But she started hitting that mole so hard, she almost destroyed it. People passing by were surprised, because she was hitting it with such force. But anyway, got all the frustration out of herself. And she probably doesn't remember it, but and I know I should have done more of that kind of thing. If I'd done more of that kind of thing, things would be much better today. But it is a Shimjong education like that, to have a one-on-one training like that I can see now. So to have that Shimjong relationship with the parents is so important. And teaches and it's a way of transferring or passing down the Shimjong of the parents to the children, I can see now. But also education of norms. There are certain things you do and certain things you don't. Let's not even get into that. Anyway, norms, right? We all know what that is. Yeah, okay. Make your bed in the morning, right? Make your bed in the morning. Such as, right? And other norms, things that you do and that you don't do in the family. And then also for the governance, in other words, to have dominion over creation, there does need to be knowledge education. The Father said there is no completion or perfection in ignorance. We also need knowledge education. Yeah, we got to know the trigonometry. We got to know the the physics and all that. That's also important. And we're still in the process of recovering that knowledge that we lost through the fall. So the education goals in the first blessing is to to grow and develop a person of character. And in the multiplication of the family, the goal is to develop good people. And in the governance, the goal there is to develop a genius. In other words, each child, each person has something that they can do better than anybody else in the world. And if you can find that and develop that, then that would be Father's definition of a genius. And so here, these are the same thing as expressed here in a graphic form. This is the first blessing. God centering the mind and body of the individual, centering on God, and then developing divinity and Shimjong within the child, oneness of God and humanity, human being, and perfection of the temple, of God's temple. And then in the family, man and woman, husband and wife, centering on God, bear children, and then from that, of course, the tribe and the nation come, people of goodness. Then God, centering on God, we have human beings and all things, in other words, the rest of creation, centering, and then we have God's ideal being realized, and then the dominion over the world in a godly way. So we would be exercising dominion in the world so that we will be using the resources that God has given us much more efficiently. I'm actually glad that some of these leftist politicians don't want us to use up all the coal and oil before we get to Cheongguk. Let's save it, all right? Don't use it now. Save it. Keep it in the ground. That's fine. That's fine. Let us use it later on. That's fine with me. But they are trying to destroy the U.S. economy so that China can take over the world. But that's, that is a slight problem, yes, okay. China's using plenty of coal. Plenty of coal, yes. And they're building all kinds of coal power plants as well, Yeah. Hey, we're still a developing country. No, yeah. But China and India are actually polluting the world much more than anybody else. Okay. Educate clearly about God, the spirit world, the true parent, and restoration through indemnity, and to live the principle. As we said in the reasons for studying OSDP, there are 6 things that we need in order to have a world peace. Right? Got to know God clearly. As clearly as I see Scott and I believe that Scott exists, I need to also believe that God exists and know that God exists. Not just believe in God, but know God, know the existence of God. This is important in the spirit world too. Yeah. And we can learn about them, and we can also have personal experiences with them that sort of confirm that knowledge and teach us more deeply. And true parent and restoration through indemnity, and we'll be getting through the whole principle of restoration in part 2 of these lectures later on, where we'll be talking about the various stories in the Bible. And unification education fulfills the 3 elements of unification of culture. unity of 심정, unity of thought, unity of lifestyle. The core true education concept is love God, love humankind, and love my nation. So actually in all these schools that Father established, that was the motto for the school. Love God, love humanity, and love my nation. Okay? Any questions so far there? So education, what is really important? And don't leave education up to the teachers, but realize that the parents are responsible, and the parents are responsible not just knowledge education. Knowledge education is actually comes on the foundation of an education of 심정 and education of the norms in the family. And on that foundation, you can have a knowledge education. And then when scientists, for example, become scientists, then they're not going to be inventing stuff that's going to destroy humanity. They're not going to be inventing viruses that kill people. What kind of motivation is that? What kind of motivation is that? To take a virus that only spreads among animals and then give it a new function, gain of function, so that it will kill people. What kind of person is doing that? But no, it's also happening in America. There are 3 labs in the world that do this. 2 of them are in America. One's in North Carolina. I think the other one's in Texas, actually. And only the 3rd one is in China. Only the 3rd one is in Wuhan. Yeah. So it's not just the communists that are doing this. This gain of function research is also, I think Obama said he stopped it, but then maybe with a wink and a nod from Obama, of course, Fauci continued it. But a person of character, a person who's been raised in this way, educated in this way, is not going to have anything to do with that. So anyway, that's, yeah. All right. God has, given us all sorts of materials, and including, nuclear energy, but we use it to create. The first thing we did with nuclear energy was to create the nuclear bomb, which, by the way, ended the Second World War just in time, but still, we even after that, we have not really used nuclear energy in the way that God intended us to do. All right, dual characteristics are the key to solving all the problems of the world, and the Songsang and Hyongsang are the master key. So God has a internal nature and external form, that is Songsang and Hyongsang. In human beings also, we have mind and body. Our mind is our internal nature, and our Hyongsang, external form, is our body. And all things were created with human beings as the model. So in the process of creation, we see in the Bible that human beings were the last thing that God created. But in the course of designing the universe, God started with the completed human being, started with the design of Adam. And from there, he designed the rest of the universe. So the universe resembles human beings because God designed first the human beings and then the rest of the universe. But in the process of creation, it was the opposite. Okay? Accordingly, all places where people gather and live should fulfill their value and purpose for existence through a balance of this internal nature and external form. So in the family, we have a family ethics. That's the internal nature of a family. And then the external part of the family are the actual parents and the children. But then internally, there is this family ethics, or you could say the tori of the family, the way of the family. In the school, the internal nature of a school should be its education principles. And then the external form would be the students and the teachers. And in a company, the company morals, the ethics and morals of the company would be its internal nature. And then in the managers, the laborers, all the employees then would be the external form. And in the nation, there's the guiding principles of the nation, or the Constitution, or not just the Constitution, but the whole way of life of a nation, the culture of a nation. And then external form would be the leaders and the people of the nation, but in the world as well. Ideology of world peace and unity should be the internal nature of the world, and then humanity and the various nations then would be the external form. So Father says that he's creating the world of the cosmic world of peace and unity. 평화, 천지 평화 통일국. Yes, yeah, peace and unity. Yes, and actually, 천일국 is actually the sort of the shortened form of that name. The longer name is the cosmic nation of peace and of unity and peace. 천지 평화 통일국. Peace and unity. Peace and unity. And so that ideology of world peace and unity should be the internal nature of the world. And so that is God's ideal. And so a Songsang type value system must be established, and unification of value systems and absolute goodness. And that's why when Father gave his founder's address to the first conference of ICUS, that's what he talked about having a morals as the internal nature of science and of the world, morals. Because without that, then if you're only looking at external form, then it doesn't really work, does it? Now, right now, many families are just groups of people who happen to share the same DNA or similar DNA, right? I mean, face it, that's right. You have different values, different morals, but that's not a family in God's viewpoint. Just having similar DNA is not enough to call yourself a family. But unfortunately, that's where we are today. But hey, we're working on it, all right? We're working on it, and it's happening. A little bit at a time, but it's happening. And so unification of value systems is because we need to have an absolute value. God is the absolute, unique, eternal, and unchanging God. So also his values are absolute, unique, eternal, and unchanging. So God's values should be our values, absolute, unique, eternal, and unchanging. So we're not going to be compromising with whatever values the world decides to come up with. And the values of the world are Satan's values, because Satan is the Lord of this world. He's the God of this world. So we don't want to compromise with those values. Saying that, now churches have to give the marriage to same-sex couples. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. That's not going to happen here. I can guarantee it. It's not going to happen. Because God's values are eternal and unchanging. And we get married for the sake of resembling God. As it says, as we had back here, right? Here, man and woman, centering on God, creating children. This is the family, this is marriage. The heterosexual, monogamous family, monogamous marriage. Yeah. And that's all, and that's the way it will always be. Yeah. If people have a problem with homosexuality, then we would encourage them to get married with a heterosexual partner, and at least in some way or another create God's ideal in that way. It's unfortunate that as a result of the fall, we have such things in the world today, but let's not compromise with that. Let's hold the standard. Are we still online, or did we get banned? I guess we're still online, I guess. We're still below the radar. Praise God, yes. Okay, they haven't caught us yet. All right, let's see. Yeah, let's do one more slide before we break for lunch. Yang and yin. Do we have how much do we? Okay, well, let's do one more slide. Okay. Yang and yin as attributes of Songsang and Hyongsang, and the resolution of real problems. We've got a lot of real problems, don't we? Okay. And God, who is the parent, and this is precedent. So a human being, the child, completion of character comes first. Individual perfection and discipline. So just as in God, Songsang and Hyongsang is primary, it comes first. Also in the human being, when we're educating children, completion of the perfection in our lives, discipline comes first. And then antecedents, there's the antecedents, comes later, yang and yin, and union of husband and wife, then family completion, household governance comes after that. All right, let's stop there for this morning. Let's come back at 1? 1 hour? Yeah. Enough? Okay, let's come back at 1 o'clock. Thank you.